Title: After I refused to pay for my daughter's luxury wedding, she blocked me. 5 days later, she invited me to a reconciliation dinner. When I arrived, 3 lawyers and my ex-wife were waiting with a power of attorney. My ex-wife said, "Either sign it or you'll never see your grandson grow up." I calmly opened my wallet, made a phone call, and said, "Sure. But first, someone wants to say a few words." Chapter 1: The Betrayal. It started with a single text. "Since you won't pay for the wedding, don't bother coming. You're blocked." Those words burned more than I expected. My daughter, my little girl who once begged me to walk her to school, had just shut me out of her life because I wouldn't fund her lavish, 6-figure wedding dream. I sat in the quiet of my study that night, staring at the photo of her as a child, pigtails bouncing as she rode her bike. I had paid for her college, her first car, even bailed her out of credit card debt once. But this was different. I wasn't going to be manipulated into burning my savings on her vanity. 5 days later, the phone rang. Her voice was softer this time. "Dad, let's talk. Come to dinner. Let's reconcile." Despite the bitterness, my heart leapt. Maybe she regretted it. Maybe we could fix what was broken. I agreed. But when I arrived at the restaurant, my heart sank. She wasn't alone. 3 lawyers sat at the table, folders stacked in front of them. My ex-wife, as smug as the day we divorced, leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. And then came the dagger. "Either sign this power of attorney," she said coldly, sliding the papers toward me, "or you'll never see your grandson grow up." The room spun. My daughter looked down, shame flickering across her face, but said nothing. I reached into my wallet, pulled out my phone, and dialed a number I had been saving for years. I smiled politely at the table. "Sure," I said calmly, "but first, someone wants to say a few words." The air in the restaurant turned electric. Chapter 2: The Unexpected Voice on the Phone. Every eye at the table was on me. My ex smirked, certain she had cornered me. The lawyers shuffled their papers, already preparing for my signature. My daughter fidgeted in her seat, avoiding my gaze. But the calmness in my voice unnerved them. The line clicked, and a deep, steady voice filled the speaker. "This is Judge Holloway. Who am I speaking with?" My ex's face drained of color. One of the lawyers actually dropped his pen. I leaned back, placing the phone in the middle of the table. "Your Honor, I'm at dinner with my ex-wife, my daughter, and 3 attorneys who've just threatened me. They've placed a power of attorney in front of me and said if I don't sign it, I'll never see my grandson again." The judge's silence was heavier than thunder. Then his voice came sharp. "That is extortion. Illegal. Do not sign anything. I'll be issuing orders tomorrow morning. Keep everything you've been handed." My ex tried to laugh it off. "Oh, come now. It's just a family matter. Nothing serious." But the judge cut her off. "I'll be the one to decide that. You and whoever advised this stunt may be facing criminal liability. Do not say another word." Her smirk evaporated. The lawyer's confidence turned to sweat. My daughter's eyes finally met mine, wide with shock. 5 minutes earlier, they thought they held all the power. They thought I'd crumble under the threat of losing my grandson. But with one phone call, the ground shifted beneath their feet. And this was only the beginning. Chapter 3: The Panic at the Table. The restaurant's hum seemed to fade as my phone sat in the middle of the table, Judge Holloway's words still echoing in the air. The 3 attorneys shifted in their seats. One of them cleared his throat, trying to salvage the situation. This was a misunderstanding. A simple family discussion, nothing more. But their trembling hands betrayed them. They knew exactly what they had done. And they knew it wasn't just family business anymore. It was a matter of law. The judge's voice, sharp through the speaker, cut away their excuses. Misunderstanding? 3 licensed attorneys threatening a man with loss of family access unless he signs over his assets? I suggest you consider your bar licenses very carefully." The color drained from their faces. Suddenly, the pile of papers on the table looked like poison. My ex-wife slammed her fist down. "This isn't how it was supposed to go. You were supposed to just sign, and all of this would be over." Her voice cracked, louder than she intended. Diners at nearby tables turned their heads, murmuring, their eyes fixed on the spectacle. For a woman obsessed with appearances, the public unraveling was a fresh humiliation. And then, my daughter broke. She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. "Mom, stop. This isn't right. I just wanted a wedding. I never wanted this." Her voice trembled with shame, and for the first time, she looked at me with guilt instead of defiance. The lawyers pushed their chairs back, muttering excuses about needing to leave. They wanted no part of what was coming. What began as a trap had turned into chaos. The lawyers fled. My daughter wept. My ex-wife's rage boiled over, and all of it happened under the gaze of strangers in a crowded restaurant, with a judge still listening on the line. The balance of power had shifted completely, and I wasn't finished yet. Chapter 4. The Counterstrike. The restaurant had fallen into an uneasy silence. Every diner was watching, forks frozen midair, conversations forgotten. My ex-wife fumed, my daughter sobbed quietly, and the lawyers had already made a clumsy retreat. But for me, the time for defense was over. It was time to strike back. I slid the unsigned papers across the table toward my ex-wife. They sat there like a dead weight between us, useless now. "You wanted me to sign? Instead, I'm filing. Tomorrow morning." Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. "Filing what?" I smiled, my voice steady. "For custody rights, for financial audits, for a restraining order, if needed. And the court will hear it, from the same judge who just listened to every word of your little stunt tonight." The judge, still on speaker, confirmed it in a voice that cut sharper than a knife. "Sir, I'll personally see to it your filings are expedited. What I heard tonight will not be ignored. As for you, ma'am, consider this a warning. Do not attempt to contact him outside of court again." My ex-wife's jaw dropped. The power she thought she wielded had been ripped away in seconds. My daughter finally looked at me, tears streaking her face. "Dad? I didn't know they'd do this. I just wanted peace." Her voice cracked, and in that moment I saw the scared little girl under the spoiled exterior my ex had nurtured. I reached across the table, placing my hand gently over hers. "You'll always have peace with me, but not like this. Not with lies." She nodded slowly, shame heavy on her face. They had lured me here to corner me, to force my hand with threats and deception. But in less than an hour, their reconciliation dinner had become their public undoing, with strangers watching, a judge listening, and the law turning its eyes toward them. And I hadn't even made my final move yet. Chapter 5. The Courtroom Reckoning. The reconciliation dinner had been their stage, but the courtroom? That was mine. The very next morning, I walked into the courthouse with my lawyer, papers in hand. Assault by coercion, attempted extortion, custody filings, financial discovery motions. Everything Judge Holloway promised was expedited. By the time my ex-wife and her legal team even tried to respond, the court date was already set. Their smug advantage was gone before they knew it. On the day of the hearing, my lawyer played the recording from the restaurant. The threats, the power of attorney documents, the judge's voice on the line confirming everything. The courtroom went silent, except for the sound of my ex-wife's nails tapping nervously on the table. My daughter sat behind me, head down, unable to look at her mother. The judge leaned forward. This was not reconciliation. This was manipulation, and this court will not tolerate it. The power of attorney stunt was declared fraudulent and void. Custody agreements shifted in my favor, ensuring I'd never be cut off from my grandson. Her financial records were subpoenaed, exposing questionable spending with money she had no right to. The lawyers who sat at that dinner were referred to the bar for disciplinary hearings. Each ruling was a hammer blow, not just legal wins, but public shattering of her scheme. As the gavel came down, I turned to look at her, the same woman who, days earlier, sneered at me with her ultimatum, "Sign or lose your grandson," now sat trembling, hollow-eyed. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to, because everyone in that courtroom knew the truth. The trap she built for me had snapped shut on her instead. The dinner had been her ambush, but the courtroom was my battlefield, and she left it not with victory, but with humiliation, shattered credibility, and the haunting knowledge that her grandson would grow up knowing the truth. Chapter 6. The Aftermath and the Final Lesson. The courtroom victory wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a much longer reckoning. My ex-wife's world unraveled faster than she could patch it. Reputation ruined. Word of the attempted power of attorney schemes spread among family and friends. For a woman who prided herself on control, humiliation was a poison she couldn't escape. Legal consequences, the state bar opened an investigation into the lawyers who backed her stunt. The once confident attorneys now fought for their licenses. Social exile. Even her closest allies distanced themselves, ashamed to be linked to something so ugly. The irony was sharp. She had demanded power of attorney, but she couldn't even control her own life anymore. For my daughter, it was a turning point. She apologized tearfully, admitting she'd been manipulated into believing her mother's lies. The shame of watching her mother fall apart at the dinner table and in court shook her into seeing the truth. Over time, she reached out more, not just for herself, but so I could spend time with my grandson. The boy who had been dangled like bait in their scheme now ran into my arms freely. That was worth more than any legal victory. I rebuilt my life quietly. My finances remained strong, my home stable, my dignity intact. More importantly, I lived with peace, no longer bound by the manipulations of the past. When people asked about what happened, I never gossiped. I simply said, "Some dinners change everything." That one just reminded me to trust the truth. That night at dinner, she had hissed, "Sign this, or you'll never see your grandson grow up." But in the end, the truth flipped her threat on its head, because I see my grandson every week, and she's the one who's lost. Epilogue. Years later. Since you asked me to continue, let's stretch this story out even further into the long-term consequences that shape not just your ex-wife, but also your daughter, your grandson, and you. The courtroom wasn't just the end of her plan, it was the end of her credibility. Among family, she was whispered about at every gathering, pitied by some, despised by others. Among friends, people who once admired her ambition now crossed the street to avoid her. No one wanted to be associated with a woman exposed in court for extortion. Alone. The lawyers who helped her scheme never recovered their reputations either, and they certainly weren't going to risk helping her again. The woman who once demanded power of attorney couldn't even control her own reputation anymore. Time revealed where her true loyalties lay. At first, she carried the shame of having sided with her mother. She avoided long conversations with you, too embarrassed to face the pain she had caused. But slowly, as she watched how you treated her son, your grandson, with love, patience, and no manipulation, she understood the difference between control and care. Years later, she confided in you, "Dad, that dinner was the worst mistake of my life. I let myself be used. But you never turned your back on me. That's why I'll never let anyone take my son away from you." Her words were redemption, and your bond was stronger for it. The boy who had once been used as leverage grew up knowing the truth. He saw firsthand the difference between arrogance and integrity, between manipulation and love. He didn't just see you as a grandfather. He saw you as an example. When he graduated high school years later, he hugged you first, whispering, "Grandpa, you're the one who taught me what family really means." And in that moment, every wound from that night at the restaurant healed. You didn't just win in court, You won in life. You lived free of their manipulations. You kept your dignity intact. And you left a legacy of truth and resilience for your daughter and grandson to carry forward. At that dinner, your ex-wife sneered, "Either sign it, or you'll never see your grandson grow up." But years later, it was you, not her, sitting proudly in the front row at his milestones. She lost him. You never did. And that was the ultimate revenge. Was this revenge perfectly justified? Tell us what you think about this story in the comments below. Like the story. If you think this story is justified, share it with someone who needs this energy, and subscribe to Lauren's Story for more jaw-dropping tales of betrayal and justice. Because here, every lie has its reckoning, and every betrayal finds its shadow. Stay sharp, stay strong, and stay tuned.